salutations, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. On today's program, I will be giving my review of the Preacher Final Season, Episode 3, titled Deviant. Now, just to forewarn you guys, as always, I will be going pretty heavy on the spoilers in this video, so if you are not caught up on the show at this point and absolutely do not want to know all the details that occurs in this episode, well, I highly recommend that you exit out of here now and save this video for a later date. However, if you really don't mind knowing all of the details, well then go ahead, pull yourself up a chair, grab yourself a bottle of some of that fine rat water, because here we discuss Preacher Final Season, Episode 3, titled Deviant. So, what are my thoughts on this episode? Well, I will fully admit that I did somewhat enjoy this episode as opposed to the previous one, but I still can't help but feel that there's still a lot of flaws in the narrative that is just really hard to ignore, and I will be getting to that sometime a little later in this video. So we start out the video with what appears to be a beauty cream commercial, and sure enough, the beauty cream happens to be a product of Toscani. Yes, you guessed that right. This appears to be Frankie's business. And then we cut to Cassidy getting a nice little dick shaving again for this particular type of cream or these type of beauty products to be shipped out. And apparently Cassidy is at Bensonhurst according to the title card, which I find rather confusing. I'm guessing this is a flash forward because not long after that, Cassidy is thrown back into his cell and he's still there with the Seraphims. So, and then later on, the whole conversation between Cassidy and the Seraphim, it seemed like they're still back at Masada. So I'm really confused as to where this part takes place at the beginning, if it's in Bensonhurst or if he's back at Masada. If anybody has any idea, please certainly clear that up in the comments down below. Then we cut to the Saint of Killers and Eugene, and they really don't have much to contribute in terms of character progression or progression to the story overall. As far as we know right now, as it stands, they're in Texas, and they're just still on the hunt for Jesse. And it's kind of funny. I really like the scene where Eugene was begging the Saints, like, hey, can we actually find a ride somewhere so my feet aren't killing me? And the Saint is really not having any of this. And those two end up converging upon a diner because Eugene is hungry and the Saint thought, well, might as well give the kids something. And the Saint is not too happy that they don't have whiskey on the menu for some reason. So Eugene tries to quell the situation by, hey, let me order up some turtle pie. That should make things better, right? Then at one moment we have Eugene in the bathroom just minding his own business, just doing his own business, and he gets propositioned by the other guy in the stall right next to him. And apparently Eugene didn't know that the guy right next to him was proposing some sort of, a little bit of a homoerotic interlude, so to speak. And Eugene thought that he just wanted some toilet paper. So the guy was like, oh no, come here. I just want to just put your ear up to the hole. We know exactly where this is going. Or no, it was put your mouth up to the hole. Poor Eugene has no clue what the guy wants, and of course we all know exactly what direction this is going in, and of course I'm just sitting there just cringing my head off like, oh my god, Eugene, just don't do this, please, son, you're pure. And he ends up sticking his head to the hole, and the guy was like, hey, I thought this was kind of a first date thing, not realizing that that his arse-shaped hole was actually his mouth. And not long afterwards, Eugene ended up getting pulled out by a guy who claims to be one of the sex detectives. Another Easter egg for those who are fans of the comic, but unfortunately, the sex detective's story arc literally went nowhere because the Saint of Killers ended up converging upon these two guys and ended up offing them off before we could get to know these guys. And this is just one of two problems that I have with the way that the show is handling the comic material. And I will be getting to the second big grievance of this episode in just a later time. After being hauled away on an ambulance, Tulip apparently seems to be in the sickbay portion of Masada, and she's checked out by this doctor, and the doctor said, "Oh yeah, you just got a few scrapes here and there," but which obviously according to Tulip, that's a good sign for her. It's like, "Oh hey, I can finally get out of here." But the doctor was like, I don't think you're necessarily good to go because judging by what all has happened, we require a psych evaluation." And Tulip is not having this, so a fight ensues. She breaks out of her restraints and tries to kick everybody's asses that's trying to restrain her, but it ends up taking a nurse with a hypodermic needle to jab her in the arm, and that pretty much knocked her out. After a fairly intense nightmare, which involved reading Jesse's letter, Tulip ends up waking up, and eventually she does agree to the psych evaluation from the doctor. And as soon as she's given her perspective of the cards that he's flashed to her, well, her results of the test were the following. And it appears that the doc said that she has uninhibited deviant with a personality disorder and psychopathic outbursts. And she also has a gun disorder and has issues with unresolved abandonment issues. Now, if you are aware, in the previous season, the abandonment issues are justifiable. Her mother was a complete deadbeat, and her father ended up getting killed by the police. So it's no wonder she has abandonment issues on top of all this other stuff going. And then we get to what I would consider my least favorite portion of this episode, and that involving Jesse. And Jesse really does not progress much in this episode at all. Apparently, he teleports back to Desaad to somehow rescue this child that he's seen in the window, and he confronts Jesus Desaad, and Desaad's just like, "I don't know what you're talking about." Then of course Jesse knocks him out, and then as soon as he grabs the kid, well, another fight ensues. Probably one of the biggest fight sequences to date. I will admit, it was really cool how they choreographed this fight scene, along with adding Tchaikovsky's music to it to kind of really enhance the fight sequence. But to be perfectly honest, this scene would be done so much better if you had the other two involved in the fight as well, because Jesus Desaad is a pretty big character in the comic, and there is a point where the three of them converge at the Desaad Manor, and all three of them end up fighting the people inside. But unfortunately, we only get Jesse doing that. And which brings me to my biggest issue with this episode. As it turns out, much to the disappointment from comic fans, I certainly can't be the only comic fan that was disappointed by this, but Jesus Desaad turned out to be nothing more than a nothing burger. He was nothing more than a glorified cameo, because as soon as he makes his appearance in this episode, it's not long after that where Jesse ends up killing him, basically beats his head into a pulp. And it's just a real shame. As I've said before, I'm not a purist when it comes to adapting source material, but it really irks me when you bring a potential storyline in from the comic and then just do absolutely nothing with it, because Jesus Desaad played a major important story in the comic. I won't go into too much detail, but let's just say that he does have a significant role in the comic, and it's just a real shame that the show only fans were robbed of that story arc because it's some of the most entertaining stuff that I've read in the comic. But unfortunately, we got what we got. And then on top of that, this whole storyline just seemed really pointless to me because the kid ends up dying anyway. So what was the point in Jesse going back just to rescue this kid? And it turns out he couldn't even protect this kid. I'm sure there's probably more to it because right after Jesse leaves to head back to the airport, God is seen in the window. So I guess that makes it clear that God had set this all up for Jesse to fail. But it really, I think there could have been so much more. I think that's the thing, is that I'm not angry. I'm just really disappointed because the show has been very good at adapting certain story arcs from the comic, and they did a fantastic job with Angelville, but they ended up falling flat with Jesus Desaad, and it's just a real shame. And I should not be surprised by that, given the fact that this is the final season of the show. But I still can't help but feel a little disappointed that they just completely glossed over this story arc when they had so much potential to turn this particular storyline in the comic to something truly extraordinary. And it's just a real shame that show fans were basically robbed of that potentially awesome story arc. Then, not long after Jesse departs from the Desaad Manor, he's next seen on a plane on his way to Australia, and that's when things start to get a little hairy. He starts hallucinating on the TV screen. It's apparently the news saying that they're on the hunt for a mass killer by the name of, you guessed it, Jesse Custer. And then not long after that, the pilot announces that they're experiencing some pretty heavy turbulence. And that's where the episode ends. And it's going to be interesting to see where exactly they're going to go with this story arc. I have a feeling I know exactly where it's going. I mean, we got a glimpse of that in the first episode of this season, but I will admit that as disappointed that I was at the start of Jesse's story in this episode, I do find it really intriguing where he's going with this direction on what they're doing. It's clearly evident that God has some major plans for Jesse and plans on putting him through the ringer, so it'll be really interesting to see how that turns out for Jesse. And not much happens in this episode for Hairstar and Featherstone, other than the fact that Featherstone ends up arriving at the hotel room where Jesse and Tulip are staying. Obviously, they're not there, and she then discovers a mannequin head inside the closet, and she put two and two together and figured out that Tulip has actually infiltrated Masada. But before she could capture Tulip, well, the doc ended up letting Tulip go despite her not testing very positive on her psych evaluation. Why he ended up letting her go, I have absolutely no clue. But so, yeah, Featherstone ends up trying to catch Tulip and obviously is not very successful at it. And Tulip arrives at Cassidy's prison cell only to find out from the Seraphim that Cassidy had been taken to Bensonhurst. And then I thought I would save the best for last for this review, and that is Cassidy in this episode. I love the direction that they took Cassidy in with this. After being thrown back into his prison cell, he's getting another earful from the Seraphim, and then not long after that, it cuts to Cassidy's origin story from Ireland. I cannot tell you how long I've been waiting for this particular storyline to get adapted to the show, and I was cheering for joy when we finally got to this moment. So there are some differences from the comic, but it's not that much different. It is set in Ireland during 1916, which is the Easter Rising. The only differences is that in the show, there's Billy. Billy apparently seems to be an acquaintance, I'm guessing, of Cassidy's. I don't know if he's like a close friend or what, but in the comic, Billy was Cassidy's brother. And so it's a change that I didn't really mind so much in the show. The only thing that I really wish that they would have really touched upon from the comic in terms of the origin story is, well, as you know, Cassidy was fighting during the rebellion between Ireland and England during 1916, which is the Easter Rising. And in the comic, it turns out that the guy who was leading the rebellion were basically using his soldiers as martyrs for the cause. And I really wish that this was something that they actually did stick in the show, but I get it. There's only so much that you can do in this show. But overall, I think they did a really good job. And one thing that I did like was when Billy was killed by the British. I liked how they kind of set up that whole PTSD type of angle for Cassidy, which I don't think that Garth Ennis really did something like that in the comic, and I think in the show it works relatively well. So, right after the debacle with the British, where Billy ends up getting killed, I'm sure you all know where this was going. Well, as it turns out, Cassidy ends up getting attacked by a swamp monster, and as you can guess, this is exactly how he became a vampire. And I really liked how they set this whole scene up. It was quite creepy and pretty accurate to what happened in the comic, minus Billy being there to take out the swamp monster. But yeah, overall, this was done very well. It translated to the screen very well. And then after Cassidy was attacked, he is standing out front of his family's house, and he knows that based off of what happened to him, there's no way that his family could know what happened to him. And the fact that he's not that person anymore, he's not a human anymore, he's now a monster. And for God's sakes, somebody give Joseph Gilgun an Emmy for this, because holy crap, I'm not gonna lie, he did kind of have me in tears when he was getting real emotional with the Seraphim about having to abandon his family because he really had no other choice, and you can really feel where he was coming from in that moment. And again, I'm pretty sure they're setting this up because they want us to feel sorry for Cassidy when his inevitable dark side gets exposed. But hey, I'm gonna roll along with it anyways, and I really hope that Joseph Gilgun gets some additional recognition for this because he's such an incredible actor. So in conclusion, yes, I did think this episode was an improvement over the previous episode, but not by much, and I sincerely hope that episode 4 really wows me because this season so far has not really been doing it for me, and I really, really want to like this. Trust me, guys, I really do. I love this show so much, and it's just really disappointing me that I really want to love it more, but I can't, and that's why I pray and hope that episode 4, or at least the next 1 or 2 episodes, they just really start knocking it out of the park. And a part of me has some sort of faith that they will. I'm pretty sure we might get some better direction in the next episode. I can only hope. But I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on episode 3 if you've seen it, so feel free to leave me a comment. And stay tuned for episode 4, my review of episode 4. So I don't know yet what the name of the title is, but obviously I will be sharing that in the next review. So until next time, dear friends, this is Cynical Lindsay, signing off.